the thoughts around double digits is a bit weird. We have returning guest speaker Jackie, and she's going to be talking all about Kata. I hope you all remember her. And if you have any questions overcoming from her previous talks, please leave them in the comments, chat, scroll, I don't know. And also, again, as many questions as you can think of. Please, please, please. So, Jackie, Kata,
Right.
very excited
Hi,
to have you here.
everyone. Hi. Again, thanks for joining. And also, I hope everybody's okay and healthy. Um, so, as he said, I'm going to talk about kata. So, I was going to break the talk up into two sections. So, the first section is what kata can give us and we can take into the kendo training. And also why we're asked to study kata in a certain way for different dan grades. Okay, so it's a very personal view. So some of you may not agree, some of you may agree. So just take from it what you feel. So my experience of kata will come from my experience with the sensei that I trained with, who again, as you know, was 8th Dan. So kata was part of our training every single time that we practiced. When we arrived for practice, first thing that we did after warm up was kata practice. Even if it was for 15, 20 minutes, there was always kata. So I see the scenario. Everyone arrives for practice. The sensei announces, okay, we're going to start with kata. And I can see many young guys rolling their eyes and going, oh, that's boring. I've seen it so many times and I get it. I really do. And it's because we don't do it often enough. It should be done, as I said, as part of our practice. It should be explained in such a way from this you can take into Kendo. And it should be done as part of our training and not just a few weeks before a Dan exam, because it can teach us so many things. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that I think kata can teach us. If you want to add to them afterwards, that's fine. Or if you see another aspect of kata that you think is useful, then fine. So, but from my point of view, the first thing that it teaches us is the correct direction for the hasuji. So when we're using our shinais during kendo, we're hitting each other, and the beginners to begin with, the tsuru's maybe not facing the right way, and they don't understand why the tsuru has to be facing towards the ceiling, because that represents the non-cutting side of the blade. Why does it have to be over to the side when we're cutting do? So when you're doing kata, you do it obviously with a bokto, which is a samurai-shaped wooden sword. And when you're doing kata, there are certain angles, certain aspects, the way that you cut, where you cut, that will make you start to understand, that's why we have to do this during kendo. This is why we have to do that. So you start to learn that your shinai is not just a bamboo stick that you're hitting and waving around. It actually, there's specific sides to it, because the shinai actually represents the sword. So that's one aspect. The next thing is, I feel, correct timing for attack. So learning how close we have to be during Mai is very, very difficult, especially when you've got all the bogu on and the main grill, and especially if you're a beginner, you feel awkward. The bogu's everywhere. You can't stand properly. You can't move around. You're bulky. Yeah. So it's just very, very difficult. Whereas if you're doing kata with just your gi and hakama on, it becomes a lot easier. But you also understand why you have to stand in specific mai. So an example would be kata number 1. So kata number 1 is known as the killing kata, because the uchidachi, who is the teacher side, is wanting to kill the person 100%. And to do that, they need to come down and try and cut the person's head. Now, when you're in a Dan exam, this is the kind that this kata is always mostly done wrong. So the panel are seeing you from the side, and quite often you see the people coming together, and the uchidachi goes to cut. Sudachi moves back as they're supposed to, But if the Sudachi just stays and the Uchidachi actually carries on with the cut, they're nowhere near the head. So when they're being taught kata, they should be aware that's where you should be cutting. That's the cutting side. That is the cutting, length of the blade. So it teaches you mai, and it teaches you where you need to stand. So it teaches you that kind of thing towards kendo, and it also teaches you the timing of each movement. And that kind of timing becomes more important depending on what grade you're going for. And this timing also helps us with our kendo. So we start to see the correct time to attack for ippon, and the openings become a bit more apparent because we're seeing the openings when we're doing kata. Okay, the next thing I think kata brings to us is concentration. So learning kata can be really difficult, and especially if you're a beginner and you know your feet have to be here, your hands have to be here, you need to do this, walk this way, cut here, do this, and you're like, But to learn to do it properly, you have to concentrate and take it seriously. Therefore, it teaches us to really watch and see what our opponent is doing. So there needs to be a degree of connectivity. We were taught that when we were doing kata, you never take your eyes off your opponent, apart from one kata, kata number 7, where the Uchidachi actually has his back for a couple of seconds and then turns. That's the only time that you actually have to take your eyes off the opponent. The rest of the time, you're watching the whole time. And this connectivity grows and grows as you mature into your kendo kata, and as you become more and more senior, and as you work up the dan grades, this connectivity becomes more and more important. Once you start to feel that connection with each other, then this can lead into your kendo, where you automatically start to become connected with your opponent. So, for example, the rei to each other becomes together. So one example is when you're doing kata, you have to look as if you are connected. So you both come together, you both come to sonkyo, you both come up, you both move back. And so many times in kendo, you see people coming together, they sonkyo like this, then they come up, and they're all disjointed. Whereas in kata, you can't do that because it's together. So this togetherness and this connectivity will come through to your kendo. So you'll start to understand why you have to do sonkyo together, why you have to stand up together, why you have to watch your opponent carefully, and your kendo then starts to become a lot more connected and a lot more beautiful at the end of the day. So this then leads on to the next part that I think kata gives us is discipline, dignity, and developing our inner strength. So during kata, we have to learn many things: how to do sonkyo properly, how to do kamae, footwork. This all requires discipline, and at times doing the same kata again and again and again and again. So those of you who have had kata training with me will know that if you don't do it right, you do it again and again and again and again. This takes a lot of discipline to not just go, oh, for God's sake, and just, do it any old way. You've got to keep your mind focused and you've got to be disciplined. So discipline is one of the most fundamental things in kendo, and it can be passed from kata to kendo. So we become more disciplined in our kendo practice, making sure we understand what we're doing rather than just hit here because this is men. Why have I to hit here? Why am I doing this? Because when you're doing kata, you have to understand what's happening, not just hit here, you move back, you move here, and that's kata 1. Do this, do that, that's kata 3. You've got to actually understand the story behind kata. Our sensei in Hong Kong, when I trained there, he used to give us a scenario of what each kata meant. And this is also where Jerry Sensei is very good at that as well. When he's teaching kata before dan grades, he's very good at showing the scenarios as well. And you can see that aha moment, with a lot of the beginners when they realise, oh, so this is what I'm actually doing. So discipline. So dignity as well. If you see kata being done properly, it's actually very beautiful. It's not to be done quickly, and it's not to be done like a robot. Okay, I'm coming in here. Okay, you do this, you do that. Okay, go back. Now, to begin with, as beginners, and as we all started, a lot of us look like robots when we start. So it's very difficult to kind of say to people, don't do that, because some of the footwork that you're doing in Kata is very different from the footwork that you've learned in Kendo. So sometimes it does feel a bit awkward. As far as the dignity is concerned, during Kata we must look smart. Our gi and hakama must look perfect. We must look the part, and this then translates into trying to complete the kata beautifully. It gives you a sense of belonging. Again, this can be translated back into Kendo Keiko by making sure that your chakso is all perfect, your do is done properly, everything's tied properly, and you start to show respect to each other, and this all breeds dignity. The other thing that Kata teaches us, which is actually one of the really difficult things, is inner strength, or ki. So this is not something that comes naturally. It has to be bred into our kata practice, and the only way that this can be bred is just through experience, years and years of practicing. If our internal energy is high, we feel proud, strong and confident. But if our internal energy is low, then our inner strength is low and we feel weak and vulnerable. Feeling the energy high takes a lot of practice and takes a lot of experience. So this internal energy and this internal strength is also called semi. And that's why it takes so long to understand and feel. Because when you first start Kendo and Kata, you're just trying to remember what to do next, what your opponent's got to do next, what are my next steps. So you're not really thinking about anything else. Once you start to understand, or once you start to remember the aspects of the kata and you understand the story, then this inner strength starts to come through, and it transforms into Kendo Keiko in the same way, and vice versa. If you feel strong, if you feel confident, your Kendo can become strong, confident. You understand a bit more about semi, which is pressure on the opponent to attack. So that's another thing that kata can bring us. The last thing that I feel kata can bring us is breathing. So I was taught by my sensei in Hong Kong that we should only have one breath per kata. So breathe in, move forward, perform the kata, and breathe out slowly as we part from each other once we know the danger has subsided. Breathing is important because this is very difficult to do, especially if you're nervous. If your sensei is watching you during practice and he's watching me or she's watching me. So what you have to try and do is the same as what the kiai that I spoke to you about in the last one of my first talks, was to try and hold on to your energy and hold on to your breath and push it down. So during kata, we can practice this. And again, if we can do this really well, then this is brought forward into Kendo practice, in that we can hold on to our energy or our breath into our dantian, and then our kiai improves that way. So those are some aspects of kata that I think can be brought into Kendo. If you're doing kata properly and you're concentrating and trying to do all these kind of things, it's actually quite tiring. You can feel just as tired doing kata if you're doing it properly as to, when you've had a good keiko session. So it's not, I get why some people find it boring, and a lot of the young guys don't find it as exciting as doing keiko, but as you can see, the kind of aspects that it brings into Kendo are actually really important. And if it's taught that way, as Jerry Sensei teaches it in our dojo, then I think it becomes a lot more interesting and a lot more engaging. So going on to Dan exams. So what the judges are looking for in your kata depends on what they're expecting you to kind of understand through your Kendo practice. So for example, Ikkyu to Shodan, they're looking for you to demonstrate proper Kendo, posture, basic ippon, footwork, kiai. Therefore, your kata should be done with the proper footwork and kamae and movements, but cuts are expected to be done properly with correct mai. So that's all basic stuff. Nidan, they want to start to see the timing of the hits in kendo coming in, so perhaps 2 hits together, or you see an opening and you go for it. Even if you don't get the point, they see the timing coming. And it's the same with the kata. So they want to see that you can start to understand the roles between the uchidachi and the sudachi. For example, uchidachi is seen as the teacher role and the sudachi is the student. And as such, the uchidachi should move a couple of seconds before the sudachi. The sudachi should not move first. The uchidachi is in charge of the distance between each of the kata. Sometimes during Dan exams, when people are nervous, the uchidachi doesn't move, and the sudachi, I have seen this a couple of times, the sudachi starts moving because he thinks or she thinks, oh, nothing's happening, I'll move first. But then they've failed the exam, especially in Nidan, because by that level they should understand the difference between the two roles. So that's really, really important. So they should also understand at second Dan they're not moving just because they're supposed to. They're moving because of the timing, because they're coming to do this, so I need to move that way. And they're also starting to look at wanting to see the connection between the opponents. So that's what they're looking for in kata as well. So for sandan, they're looking for in kendo the beginnings of semi. So therefore the kata should start to look alive. And by this time, with lots of practice, they will hopefully start to understand the aspect of inner strength and the start of semi. And yondan should demonstrate semi control, not breaking kamae. So kata should really feel alive. Kata should really feel as if, okay, this person is really coming to kill me. Your semi should feel and look as if it's coming through your kinsen. You can demonstrate your inner strength. You can feel the inner strength. People who are watching you can see it. Timing should feel real and not clockwork. There are some quick and slow moves, or quick and slow cuts in kata. So by this point in yondan, this should be demonstrated so that this shows that they understand semi, timing, connectivity. So it's everything. Kata should look dignified, beautiful, but deadly at the same time. And the connection should never break the whole time, just as your kendo fights before the kata. In yondan, the kamae shouldn't break at all. So that's how different levels of or understandings of kata are shown in different levels of kendo. So as you can see, there's actually quite a lot of things that you can learn from kata. I personally love kata. I think it's very, very important in our kendo practice, and I think it should be part of every kind of practice, even if it's just 10-15 minutes, because of all the things I've spoken about. So there we go.
Thank you. I love to hear other people telling other people how beneficial kata is, because so often, especially in, like, no offense to university clubs, but especially in university clubs, it's just like, oh. To be fair, I have managed to grow a small, like, subset of people in my club who are like, yay, kata, because I implant it in their head that I love it, so they, I'm assuming, are pretending to love it so that I might like them.
Yeah, I think it's just the way it has to be taught. You know, it needs to be taught in such a way that it's interesting, you know, rather than just one person moves here, that person moves here. Now, to begin with, when you're teaching complete beginners, that's what it is to begin with, until they get the actual movements into place, and then after that you can build on that. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, a lot of people find it boring, which is sad, but I understand why. you know.
How do you feel? So, like, if you're at a seminar, say, and you
Mm.
usually split up by grade, and you're
Yeah.
practicing with somebody who doesn't really care, and you've kind of just
Mm.
been stuck with somebody who's going through the motions of kata, and you're really trying your
Mm.
hardest to do good kata, but it's really, you know what I mean? It's difficult
Yeah, I
when
know what you mean.
they're just
Yeah.
going through the
Mm.
motions instead of doing the thing, and it's really difficult to get the
Mm.
connection. And you can fake the connection, and especially if they're uchidachi, because you can just follow their timing as closely as possible, but without any connection, it just feels wrong. How do you deal
Mm.
with this?
Okay, so there's been a couple of times where that's happened to me. So in one essence, yes, you're right. If it's the uchidachi, then you've just got to follow them. But in an instance like Sambomen, so kata number 3, which is one of the most difficult ones, you've actually got to demonstrate a flow between, okay, the uchidachi has control, now the sadachi has control, now the uchidachi, now the sadachi. So you've got to show that. And if they are not concentrating as uchidachi, then there's been a couple of times where I've actually done what I'm supposed to do properly, and they've almost, because the kinsen's almost come to their face, or and then very quickly they start to, oh, you know, um, if you're the uchidachi, if you're the uchidachi and it's the sadachi, then again it's the same thing. You can use your semi to really show, okay, I'm serious here. Let's do a serious practice. Or you just talk to them and just say, look, do you actually? I know you don't really like kata, but let's just try together, and without sounding, kind of what you call it, without sounding, yeah, say, do you understand what you're trying to do? Because some people are like that because they don't really understand. Not everybody, but some people don't. So there's different ways, that you can kind of get their attention, so to speak. Yeah.
I would also still advise asking somebody to take it seriously if you're like shodan and below, because especially if you don't know the person you're
Yeah.
talking to, it can really come off as rude.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there are lots of things that you can do in kendo that don't mean to be
Yeah.
rude, but like can come off as,
Yeah.
nothing.
But in that instance, I mean, you learn kendo, or you can teach kendo through example. So if you've got somebody who is not doing what they're supposed to, although I've spoken about kendo has to have connectivity, and you have to, be together, and it has to look beautiful. If you've got somebody who's not, you practice doing what you're supposed to do within the parameters that you've got. Because at the end of the day, if it was a real Dan exam, you would pass, and they wouldn't. For example, if you're Sadachi and they're Uchidachi and they just stand there when you're told to start the kata, do not move. They are supposed to move first. So always practice what you feel is right. And usually people will come around and say, oh, right, fair enough then, But yeah, that's one way around it, is just keep doing what you feel is right. So.
Yeah, we have got a question from Peter asking, what's your particular favorite kata and why? Difficult question.
My favourite kata. Sorry. I like all of them, but I think probably my favourite one is kata number 6. So kata number 6, if you can remember, is yeah, that's right. Yeah. So does Peter know what kata number 6 is? I don't want to be rude. Hmm? Okay. Okay, the first one, right? Okay, okay. Well, my favourite one's number 6, and the reason I feel it's my favourite because, um, no matter what side you are practicing at, there's always has to be able to do it properly. There's always got to be that real connectivity and that real feeling of semi from both of you. And if it doesn't, if there's no real semi from both of you, then it doesn't work. So for me, that demonstrates everything that kata should be. Does he like when he practices kata? Does he enjoy it? I'm asking Peter. Do you enjoy kata?
Oh. Likes it.
Hmm.
Like it. Kidding.
Okay. If he doesn't know what number 6 is, Peter, you should just have a look at it. You know, they're all online. You know, type in Kendo Kata and videos will come up. Um,
With the real light blades. Oh, can you recant your story of doing kata with Aito swords?
yes, right. So when I was okay, so my turning point of when I really understood about kata and when I really started understanding it was when I was training for my third dan in Hong Kong, and when we were doing, I mean, we did kata every session, as I said before, but before dan exams, that would include increase to maybe 1 hour, you know, each session out of a 2 hour session. So this particular time, I was training for my third dan, and I was just doing kata, and at that point, I was a bit like most people at that point, kind of, oh yeah, okay, let's just do kata, you know. And Sensei was standing watching me, and he kept shouting at me, saying I was doing this wrong, doing that wrong. You've got to make it look real. So then he said to me, okay, next week bring your iaito, and I will bring my sword, and we will do kata together. And I said, oh, all right, okay. So the next week we arrived, and he did kata with me. I understood then when to move and why to move. Because he just, especially for Ippomi, kata number 1, he was Uchidachi. He was coming to kill me. And I really had to move, you know. So to me, that's when kata really became alive, and I learned so much in that 1.5 hour training session with him. It just all seemed to click. And yeah, I learned a lot. And actually, I was teaching kata before the last set of Dan exams in March. Not this March, but the March before, I think. I can't remember now. Yeah. And I took a group of Tai Sudokai guys to one of the squash courts close to us and practiced every week. And one guy just could not quite understand why we were doing a specific move. So I did the same thing. I brought my iaito and I said to him, okay, I'm going to use this today. And we only needed to do it once before he understood why he had to move the way he moved. And his kata after that was so much better. So, you know, yeah.
Bring a live weapon and cut them.
Well, no.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah. That I still.
It just gives another spin on it, and it gives it another dimension of reality that people then get, you know. And that's what happened with me with my sensei in Hong Kong. It put a spin of reality on it and made me really understand why. And it was only when I did it that, and then we went back to Bokuto, and then we did the kata again, and I really understood why he was getting angry at certain things. You know, so yeah.
I think it is also a bit to do with people see kata as very slow, and they're just like, well, slow stakes, nothing's really happening. If they don't actually have it in their head that this can be done. These are techniques that are like really not serious, but like can do a lot of damage, even if you're doing it just
Yeah.
with Wakuto. And like,
Well, I mean, it's like doing the Godachi, which is the kata where one person's got a long sword. For those people who don't know, one person's got a long sword and one person's got the size, which is a dagger, and you have 3 sets of kata for that. And when I was learning Godachi before my Yondan exam, again talking about Jerry Sensei, he would, drill it into us, what you're trying to do is not get him to let you. No, he wants to stab you here with the Kodachi. That's why you're doing this. And he would explain if you didn't, move the shinai, the bog toe in a proper manner and the way that you're supposed to. He would then show you where he could stab you. And again, it's that sense of reality that makes you really think about what you're doing, and that's what brings your kata alive. So yeah.
Have we got any more questions in the chat? I see people watching you guys. Have you got any more fun stories about kata? Like any events that happened where you've just been like either wow or what? These are the two main things. Either shocked or amazed.
I can't really think of very much, to be honest with you. That one incident with me with my sensei was probably the biggest kind of thing. I can't really think of, trying to rack my brain. I think the first time that I ever saw kata was I'd only been doing kendo for about 2 months, 3 months, and there was the Asian tournament that I was asked to go and help at. And the Asian tournament, for the people who don't know, is the second biggest tournament next to the World Championships. By the time I got to second Dan, I was fighting in it every year, and it's teams from all over Asia, so Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Russia, all those kind of places. And before, during the opening ceremony, they had Kendo Kata, and it was demonstrated by two 7th Dan, two 8th Dan senseis from Japan, because all the judges came from Japan for that tournament, and they carried out a demonstration of kata, and they had yaitos, some swords, and I just watched it and I thought, that is beautiful. It looked very, very dignified. It looked, and they had the proper, not just a normal gi and hakama. They had the real hakamas, and it just looked so dignified, but deadly at the same time. Like if one of them was to move, the other one would die. But that was my first exposure to kata. And I didn't really understand it at the time, but it just looked lovely. Yeah, I really thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the thing that we are also missing a bit in, like, not kind of the West, but like kind of just outside of Asia, I guess.
Mm.
Like, you don't get to see a formal demonstration of kata in person. You
Yeah.
can watch as many videos as you want. There is something completely, I can't explain it, but there's a complete difference between seeing kendo in a video, seeing kata in a video, and like actually watching it in person. There's just so many more things that you actually see, and it's just a completely different experience. I genuinely don't understand
and I think
it. It makes no sense.
I know, I think that's why we've been very lucky, my son and I, the kind of kendo training that we've in Hong Kong. We saw a lot of that. We went to Japan many times and were exposed to that kind of thing a lot. So it's fundamentally, I mean, people say kendo kata, but kata is kendo. I think they both go together. So yeah, I think we've been very lucky that way. As you say, it's very different when you see it in real life as to when you watch a video.
watch videos again and again and again and again and again till you learn it, and then after you stop paying practice for people post COVID because uh in-person training not great. So there are no more questions at the moment, so I'm just going to ask one more question, and
Okay.
then we're going to close out. What do you think about
Okay.
Bokuto no Nihoru Kendo Keikoho Kata? So like the very basic kata that's just teaching. Basically, it's used in high school in Japan to teach kendo as kind of like in the PE. If that makes any sense. Like
So what?
Ben
So what
Kote
are you
Do
asking? Sorry. What?
what so what are your opinions on like teaching people Bokuto Nyoro Kendo Keikoho Kata as well as
All right. I see. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean, we used to do that. In Hong Kong, we had that as part of our practice as well. And it was very, very useful because just like Kendo Kata, it taught us basic Mai, it taught us timing, and it's just this disciplined practice again and again and again. Um, so we used to do quite a lot of that during our practice. We would say we had about 45 minutes of that. And what Sensei would do is he would introduce a routine of maybe 4 or 5 cuts that we had to do in succession, and then he would explain why we're doing each one, and then we would just repeat it again and again and again and again. And it's this continuous practice if you're doing it properly, that builds the muscle memory and builds this kind of understanding of what you're trying to do. And then when you pick up the shinai is very different. It's like when I started Iaido to me just made total sense of what the shinai was supposed to do. Again, it gave me another sort of side to what the shinai represented. you know. So yeah, all these different aspects I think all link together to make your kendo much more interesting.
Thank you so much for all of your
You're
information. It was
welcome.
really great to hear such not decisive, good information about kata from a really great perspective. Uh, thank you, and I'm so happy
You're
to be
very
having you
welcome.
on again. Thank you all for coming to this little talk. We will be hopefully having another one next week. I'm running out of people to ask at this point.
Oh,
It's also getting to that point in the semester
that's
where
a
it's just
shame.
like trying to keep on track of everything.
Even junior people should come on and just talk about things like their experience of kendo and how what things they find difficult and why, and
That's
you
why
know
we're here, and we feel this.
it doesn't need to be senior guys, and girls. It can be anybody, and I mean, even listening to there was the guy up in Inverness, Doogie. He contacted me a while ago just after I passed my Yondan and asked if I would do a video for him, talking about ladies and women in kendo, because he had a few beginners who were ladies, and he said they were saying things like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do this," and so I took videos of some of the girls that I was practicing with and spoke to them and asked them, what do you think about kendo, and Gareth Sensei as well. He put a wee script in my video and asked him about his perspective about women. So I mean, even something like that, talking about anything from a different perspective. I mean, there's so many women I think that would like to start kendo, and they see it and they think, oh yeah, that's great, and then they get there, and I think it's because in the West it's predominantly male. And when I started in Hong Kong, I was the only Western woman, and I was the only woman in our dojo. But then over the years, we got more and more women in it, and then it was very 50-50. But here in the West, I mean, most of the time, I'm the only woman in my practice in Taisadokai.
So cute. I think it's
Yeah,
very okay that
yeah,
only one woman are allowed per session. Like literally, it was funny, almost like shell was there. It was literally only one at a time. Sometimes just amusing, but also very disturbing.
Yeah, and I mean, fighting with guys doesn't bother me because that's how I started in Hong Kong, and but for some women that might be very, very intimidating, So I mean, I think even if somebody came on and talk about something like that, it doesn't have to be a senior person. I said it could be a junior woman, just to try and promote females in Kendo and even juniors as well,
Again, I don't
16 to 18-year-olds.
people doing this who wants to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, honestly, it's okay. It's just like speaking to Izzy in our sitting room.
But there are
So,
plans, poor execution, but lots of plans. Again,
oh
yeah.
no,
Oh,
no, but it's okay. I mean, it's a good thing to have something like this, and I mean, it's good that you record it and people can watch it afterwards. And I missed Bazzy's talk last week, but I managed to watch it on Facebook. And if you haven't, people who are watching, if you haven't seen Baz Sensei's talk from last week, do watch it. It's really, really interesting. Just Izzy and I were talking before we came on live, and I've always been a very sporty person, but as I've got older, there are certain things that I'm having trouble with. And I was very interested in his talk with resistance band training. And as a result of his talk, I've just gone out and bought my first set of bands, So it's very, very interesting for what he says. So please, watch it.
we now have a back
So
catalogue of 10 weeks of these guys on binge. Great fun, great fun. So anyway, we're coming up to the 45-minute mark, and we have no more questions.
Okay.
Great talk. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for listening.
Okay.
Hope you
No
guys all
worries.
have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Stay
Yeah,
sane.
take care.
Continue to watch Kendo videos